welcome to Anything But Ordinary with your host, Spooky and Raven. Tonight, we are going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, Old West Outlaws. And tonight, we're going to focus on Cole Younger. My name is Spooky, and here is your other host, Raven.
Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. I had a great Memorial weekend. How about you?
Oh, I had a pretty good one. Had a bunch of people over. I was so glad when they left.
Yeah, I had a pretty good one. I was just kind of bummed out that it was short, but it was good.
Oh, the weekend's never long enough.
Right.
The reason that I chose this particular subject is because I read Cole Younger's book, The Story of Cole Younger by himself. And let's face it, the guy was an outlaw. He's going to make himself look good, so to speak. And everything that's in the book you mainly have to take with a grain of salt. But some of these things that he talks about are facts in history.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he was the seventh of 14 children. He grew up in a very prosperous and prominent political family. His father was in the legislature of Missouri 3 times, and most of his relatives were, the men relatives.
Mm-hmm.
They were, and his mother was the daughter of a prominent senator. I'm getting a little tongue-tied here.
That's okay. Don't worry. Just talk away like you're talking to me like we always do. So.
Well, he says the reason that he wrote the book was because all the other books that he read about the Younger brothers were not true, and they were full of stories and crimes that they never did. And he said that he was more or less going to set the story straight. And like I said, he grew up in a prominent family. He was the 7th child of 14 kids. And he was born in January of 1844. And this was at a time, when he got older,
Mm-hmm.
the Civil War came about. And he served in the Civil War under Quantrill.
Right.
Now, Quantrill was, he was a captain in the Confederate States Army, but his territory was mostly Missouri, because Missouri, and I didn't know this, I always assumed that Missouri was a free state, but Missouri was actually in favor of slavery, but they were not in favor of succession.
Yeah.
So a lot of the skirmishes with Quantrill happened in Missouri, Kansas, parts of Arkansas, and parts of Texas. So Quantrill didn't really have, I guess back then it was a big area, but if you stop and think about it, Quantrill mainly ran in Missouri, which he didn't really see that much battles. What he encountered were mostly skirmishes.
Right.
So, and of course, when people think of Cole Younger, they think of the James boys, Frank and Jesse James, which he did.
He ran with them, though, yeah, for a short period.
For a short period, exactly. But he was in when Cole Younger officially enlisted into the CSA, Confederate States Army. He was a lieutenant.
Mm-hmm.
Why he got such a high rank when he went in, I don't know. But he did run, and he was with Quantrill's Raiders. And so wasn't Frank James. Coleman Younger says that he did not even meet Jesse James until, I think it was 1866.
Right.
When Jesse James came into the picture and rode with Quantrill, Cole Younger was already down in Kentucky, running with a group there. Another guy that he rode with was Bloody Bill Anderson.
Yeah.
Bloody Bill Anderson rode with Quantrill for quite a while, and that's where Cole Younger met him. Well, Bloody Bill Anderson, he didn't get that name Bloody Bill for no reason. He was one of the most deadliest and most brutal pro-Confederate guerrilla.
Right. I threw a Bloody Bill's picture now. The first one was Cole Younger, and this one's Bloody Bill, just so, just let people kind of get a look at what they're looking at, what they look like while we're talking. But he was crazy, dude.
He was crazy.
He was psychotic.
Bloody Bill Anderson was crazy. You hear a lot in history about, Quantrill's Raiders. Quantrill did this. Quantrill was nothing compared to Bloody Bill Anderson. I mean, Quantrill, he got into skirmishes. These were, there were Union soldiers all over Missouri. And Quantrill was a Confederate soldier. So he's going to have skirmishes with these different Union companies and soldiers and everything. Bloody Bill Anderson, he was pro-Confederate, but he didn't ride so much.
Well, he joined because he was anti-slavery in the one pro-Union band. He was part of the Jayhawkers?
Jayhawkers.
Yeah.
Those are from Kansas.
But then he switched over.
Yeah, he did switch over.
To the Bushwhackers, so.
But he was more out for revenge than anything because of his acts as a guerrilla. Led the Union to imprison his sisters.
Right.
Because
one of them was killed.
Back then, if you were a Southern sympathizer, you went to jail. You either went to jail or you lost everything you had. So his sisters were imprisoned, and one of them died while in custody, and Anderson devoted himself to revenge. And that's mainly what was on his mind when that's what drove him, was revenge for the death of his sister. And in late 1863, Bill Anderson and Quantrill had kind of a falling out. So Bloody Bill Anderson told a lie, implicated Quantrill in the murder of a prominent pro-Confederate person.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they were investigating this, it more or less forced Quantrill out of Missouri and down into Kentucky to get away from all of this. And Bloody Bill Anderson more or less took over. And that's how Cole Younger started writing for him. Cole Younger and Frank James. See, Cole Younger and Frank James were friends.
Well, when I was kind of reading up on them, they were all kind of, and Belle Starr, she grew up with a few of them in Missouri. I think it was the Younger brothers she grew up with? She had connection with them.
She grew up with the
Younger brothers. Yeah, she grew up with the Youngers and James boys.
She grew up in the same area.
They were actually friends that I read about. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, there was Belle Starr was a female outlaw. I'm going to get to her.
We'll get to her later, but yeah, I just kind of threw that in there. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, Bloody Bill Anderson led his own group of raiders, and he became the most feared in the state of Missouri. He killed and robbed Union soldiers, civilian sympathizers. He forced Quantrill to leave the area, because once Quantrill was gone, Bloody Bill had free reign.
Yeah, but even before he got into all of that, I mean, he was kind of shady in the beginning anyway, when you kind of read about his upbringing, because he kind of came from a good family. His dad hooked him up with his job, running, cargo and horses and stuff back and forth, and it's like he didn't even want to do that. He was supposed to bring some stuff back up from Mexico, and somehow he came back with nothing. So either he, sold it, ditched it, or, who knows what he did with it, and never really told what he did with it.
Even before the war, he was stealing horses.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And then he got into the horse trade, which basically was stealing horses.
And this is a guy that came from another prosperous family.
Right. It seemed like a bunch of them did.
And had a good education.
Yeah, they just decided to...
He just didn't like
being told what to do and
status in life,
Exactly.
I mean, back then, if you had money, you were to act a certain way. you were to be a certain way, Bloody Bill Anderson, he was just he was just a bad seed. He did what he wanted to do, and the Civil War gave him free reign to do all this killing that he wanted to do. So anyway, that's how Cole Younger met Bloody Bill Anderson, even rode with him for a while, and him and Frank James, somewhere along the way, just they quit riding with him. They went down to Arkansas, was going to hook up with this other person, and somewhere along the way, the Civil War ended.
Well, look at how horrid, nasty, Bloody Bill Anderson was. He used to keep like a rope to record his killings on it, and it reportedly.
Oh yeah.
He had like 54 knots in it at the time of his death.
Every time he killed someone, he'd tie a
knot in a rope. Yeah.
And he carried it with him.
And the reason, and the reason why he switched from the Jayhawks over to the pro-Confederate bushwhackers, come on, most people in those groups were basically into robbery, looting, and everything for personal gain and stuff.
Yeah.
Not really about
carpetbaggers.
Yeah, it wasn't about for the political cause. Come on.
No, it was
terrorizing and taking what they wanted.
Self-gain.
Exactly. Yeah. Jinx. But yeah,
Jinx. But Cole Younger, like I said, he grew up in a prosperous family. Cole Younger had an education, and if you ever read his book, and you can download it from Amazon.com, you can tell that man had an education.
Mm-hmm.
He just his family owned several farms, not just one or two farms. They owned several farms. That's how rich these people were for their time. And his father, Henry Washington Younger, served 3 times in the Missouri legislature. He was a judge in the Jackson County Court. His mother came from a political family. They even owned slaves.
Yeah, sorry, my cat yelled. Apologize.
No, that's okay. But they even owned slaves, and they had one slave that was very, very loyal, and her name was Aunt Susie. That's what they called her. And Aunt Susie, when the Union came to their home, they tried to hang this slave in the barn to try to get her to tell where Cole Younger was. And she wouldn't do it. So they walked off and left this woman hanging in the barn, and it just so happens that a member of the family came out to the barn and saw her hanging there and cut her down.
Oh.
People talk about how bad people like Quantrill was. There was one side was just as bad as the other when they went looking for you. And back then, if you were a certain age, you were required to serve in the Army.
Right.
And I think it was all men, 16 to a certain, I think it was 16 to 30, something like that. If you were in good health, then you were expected to serve.
Right.
Well, his father was murdered along a road this one time. And when Cole Younger, this was right before Cole Younger went into the Army. He went to the local authorities, and nothing was done because it was well known that the Younger family were pro-Confederate. They were Southern sympathizers. And like I said, back then, if you were a Southern sympathizer, you were immediately a spy. It didn't matter if you were just a farmer trying to raise your family, you were an immediate spy. You were helping them out. It's and you didn't even have to do anything. You didn't have to do a thing. All you had to do was just be pro-Confederate. But it was the same way, though, with being pro-Union.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of something that went both ways. But his father was killed by road bandits,
mm-hmm.
and 2 of his sisters were murdered just for being Southern sympathizers.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
2 of his sisters and a cousin.
Right.
So during the Civil War, things just were not easy for you. You didn't even have to be involved in the war. All you had to do was be for a side.
Or just be breathing at some.
Or just be breathing
really,
in some cases.
In some cases, in some places, you just really had no luck, you know.
But Cole Younger was a scrapper. He would ride into a hail of bullets to help out his comrades. And a lot of times, he made it. He would make it in through this hail of bullets, in and out, got the job done, didn't get hit. Although there were bullet holes in his clothes, they missed his body. In 1863, I think it was. I'm sorry, but I was trying to think of this date. But I think it was 1863. At the age of 19, he was promoted to captain. Just because of his escapades during skirmishes. He never backed down. He never ran. He would get right in the thick of it. But they say that he also had the gift of gab. That he could talk anybody into anything. And when his one of his ex-teachers were captured by the Confederates, who was pro-Union, they were going to kill this guy. And he went in and he talked to the captain and got this guy set free, knowing full well that this man was going to walk out from being their prisoner and go and enlist into the Union Army. He was very loyal to the people he knew.
Right.
When he got out of the Army, he tried to go back to farming.
I'm sorry, but how do you go back to farming after doing all that stuff? It's hard to, you already got that in your system. It's hard to just wind down, you know what I mean? Because you're always going to be on guard.
Well, it is, because one part that I left out, his mother left the county, went to one of their farms in another county. I can't remember the name of the county off the top of my head.
Right.
And she took her youngest children with her, plus their slave, Aunt Susie. And the Union showed up at her door and were looking for her son, Cole. And of course, he wasn't there. At that time, she had no idea where he had been. She knew he was off fighting the war somewhere. And all she wanted to do was just take her family to safety, because she was basically ran out of her house. And this was wintertime. And what the Union soldiers did, they forced this woman to burn down her own house and sent her and her children off to find shelter in a snowstorm.
Man.
So, because they were, she had, wrapped the kids in blankets, but herself, she didn't have much protection against this snowstorm that they went off in. So she was sick, and from that time, she was pretty much not in good health for the rest of her life.
Yeah, I could see why. I mean,
and two of his sisters were rounded up, and they were, and it wasn't just his sisters. There were several women that were rounded up, and they were kept in this above the general store in this town. And somewhere along the way, and one of the women was a relative of the two sisters, a cousin. And somewhere along the way, they tore this building down with those women in it. And the funny part about that is, or the strange part about that is, that the store part, the man got all of his wares out of that store. He emptied out that store.
But yet all the women perished. Left. Yeah.
So he knew what they were going to do. He knew they were going to tear down that building. And they tore it down with all those women in it. I think there was something like 10 women in that building. They were all wives or sisters or relatives of these guerrillas fighting with Quantrill.
Well, that sparked a lot of, the revenge part. It, started with him wanting revenge for his sisters.
Right. A lot of his family died just for being related to him. He was one of the most wanted Confederate soldiers of that time in that area. And everybody, Confederate soldiers and Union soldiers alike, heard of all of his escapades during a skirmish because he was not afraid to fight. And he was one of the first in and one of the last out. So he had quite a prestigious army history.
Right. But then he went on to become a massive criminal, so.
Oh, yeah. Yes, he did. When after the Civil War, like I said, he went back to one of his
old haunts.
His family's farms.
Yeah.
No, and he decided that he was going to lead a quiet life as a civilian. He was going to be a farmer.
Yeah, we can't.
Well, he was going to grow cotton. Well, the cotton crop failed, so he decided to go into the cattle business. And the cattle business was doing pretty good, but in the meantime, the state of Missouri passed a Drake Constitution. And what that said was that anyone who served as a Confederate soldier could not vote, could not hold public office, could not hold a government job, could not preach in any church, could not be an elder in any church, could not have a business. In other words, if you were a Confederate soldier, you were just out of luck because they were not going to let you earn a living.
Right. They're basically wanting to snub you out.
Right.
Without taking you out, you know?
Right. And this kind of opened up the door for carpetbaggers to come in and start seizing property.
Yeah. Big time. Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, you pushed them to it, basically. You had nothing else you could do, so.
Well,
some of them. I mean, not all of them. I mean, some really enjoyed doing that stuff, but you know what I'm saying.
But it more or less drove him to do what he did later in life. Him and, like I said, him and Frank James were friends. So, and the James boys were pretty much in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
They went back, went to get married, went to, work the farm because and I'm not going to really get into the James boys too much, but
yeah, no, that wasn't
I mean, they should be mentioned
yeah.
because after all, they were part of this gang.
Right. Oh, yeah, they were.
Because they went through a lot too. I mean, they went through their stepfather, who was a preacher, was hanged in a barn when the Union soldiers went looking for them.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Jesse was not in the army when that happened. That was one of the things that drove him to go fight with Quantrill. And there's really nothing that I've ever found that said that Jesse James was an official Confederate soldier. It was more like he just went to join Quantrill. He didn't care if he was in the army or not.
That's
I'm sure maybe he was.
Well, that's what I kind of read too. Was what that's exactly what you were just saying. It's kind of like what I ran into too. You know what I mean? So.
I didn't find one thing that said Jesse James officially enlisted into the Confederate States Army.
Right, somebody out there may contact us and tell us, hey, yes, here it is, the information. That's cool. We're done with that. But from what I was seeing, I didn't run into it to myself. So.
Yeah, but once the state of Missouri adopted the Drake Constitution, which was, by the way, later overturned a few years later, it really gave them no choice, and they even called for Confederate soldiers to come and turn themselves in, and this was like 2 years after the war.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the governor of the state of Missouri said, well, if you're a Confederate, if you fought on the Confederate side, if you turn yourself in, take our oath and all this other stuff, we'll let you earn a living.
Right.
Well, that wasn't true either, because some of the Confederate soldiers that went to turn themselves in were shot. They were ambushed.
I was going to say they were kind of executed one by one. Yeah, I know.
So, and like I said, this was 2 years after the war.
Well, some people just hold revenge. I mean,
well, it wasn't just Missouri though; it was in the South also.
Well, yeah.
But and this I didn't understand. I mean, they say that they were going to help these people, and they wouldn't. If you were an ex-Confederate soldier, you couldn't even own a gun legally. Now, we're talking about the Old West. How are you going to protect yourself without a gun? There were Indians. There were wild animals. I mean, back then, people didn't go to the grocery store and get a couple pounds of hamburger or a couple steaks. They went out, they shot their meat, they processed it themselves. That's how they made a living. That's how they ate.
Right. Well, no, I understand. There's other people. I mean, they had to have that anyway to protect themselves from the criminals. But, I mean, Coleman Younger, I don't know, they did so many robberies and stuff, even up here, up north. I think that was one where
if they
he
hadn't
got caught.
if they hadn't gone to Minnesota, if they hadn't gone to Minnesota, there is no telling how far they would have gone.
Yeah, because they were heading up this far, So.
Yeah, and these stories that you hear about robbing from the rich and giving to the poor is bull. They did not do that. They robbed to fill their own pockets.
Right.
That's all they were in it for, to fill their own pockets.
Well, some of them were in it because they enjoyed killing, though, too, like Bloody Bill.
Oh, some members of the Coleman Younger gang, or James Younger gang were in it strictly for themselves. There were some vicious men in that group. And Cole Younger was one of them. And so wasn't Frank and Jesse James. They were all very vicious men. They were in that to fill their own pockets. They didn't care about anybody else. They'd rob a stage, and you see in the movies where they say, whoa, you're wearing a Confederate hat. Did you fight for the bars and stars? And if the person said, yeah, they gave them their money back. That's bull. They didn't do it.
Well, you know how things change.
They robbed everybody, even the women.
Right. Or, even a dog's bone, I suppose they'd take anything they wanted, really. Back then, they didn't care who, what, or where,
And they...
Even if they didn't need it.
And they credit Jesse James with pulling the first train robbery.
He wasn't, though.
In Adair, Iowa. He was not the first train robber.
Mm-mm.
Bloody Bill Anderson was.
Yep.
Bloody Bill Anderson, that's how he got ammunition and guns and money to fund his little group of raiders. He robbed trains, he robbed stages, he robbed banks. But for some reason, Jesse James got credit for the first train robbery in history at Adair, Iowa, and that's not true. That is so not true.
Well, when they were up, when they, like you said, when they came up here to rob the bank up north, when they came all the way up north to rob the bank, that's when they got caught. But they didn't succeed in it because the town folks stopped them.
They didn't get any money up there. They got about, according to Cole Younger in his book,
they killed like two people,
they got less than $200.
See, I heard they didn't get nothing, but he would know. It's his book. But they killed the banker, and some.
They killed a guy that was one of the tellers didn't go to work that day. So this guy was taking that teller's place, and he had another job in the bank. I can't remember what it was.
Oh, that's right. That quote-unquote volunteer cashier of the bank, yeah.
There you go. Well,
but tons of people.
Coleman Younger gives a long account of the Northfield, Minnesota raid.
Mm-hmm.
And it is actually considered the only authentic account of the Northfield raid. Other people have written about it and kind of embellished on it, but historians and experts all say that Cole Younger's account of that Northfield bank robbery is the only accurate and authentic account of it. And that happened in 1876. excuse me, they went up there to rob the bank in Northfield, Minnesota. They believed it would be easy because, see, they scouted this place out. They thought it would be easy because the town was full of farmers.
They were wrong.
Oh, were they wrong?
Yep.
When those people found out that their bank was being robbed,
there was like over hundreds of them. Formed a posse and pursued them.
Yes, they did, and they tracked them down for, I think it was something like 10, 11 days. They even threw rocks at them.
They all came out.
That Cole Younger, they had orders to go in there. So many would go in the bank. The rest of them would stay outside and keep everybody back. And they had orders not to kill anybody. Well, Clell Miller, who was trigger happy, was in the bank, and he shot the bank teller. The problem with robbing the bank in Northfield, Minnesota was the 3 people who were supposed to go into the bank got drunk the night before, and they were still drunk when they went to rob that bank. And Cole Younger was standing outside, and he said he would fire his pistol in the air trying to get the, or in the dirt at their feet trying to get these people to back off, and they weren't backing off. He said they even threw rocks at them.
Right.
So these bandits, right out of town, not all of them made it. Some of them got killed and some lost their horses, or horses were shot out from underneath them. Some of them were shot off their horses. But by the time it was all done, there was the 3 younger boys, and it was Jim and...
Well, the James brothers, they made it back to Missouri, but the Cole, Bob, and Jim, they didn't make it out. Neither did Charlie Pitts.
Charlie Pitts.
Yeah, they were stuck.
There was
shooting up the posse that was after them.
Jesse and Frank James ran off and left them.
Yeah, they made it back to Missouri.
They made it back to Missouri.
Right.
Well, Cole,
Bob, Jim,
and
Charlie Pitts
were still stuck in Minnesota. And the thing of it was, they were 10 days in Minnesota trying to get out, and they still weren't any further south than Mankato.
Right. They were stuck in like this wooden ravine area in Watawan River, I think. I can't remember the name of it. But Pitts was killed in that.
Pitts was killed in that.
Yep. But the younger brothers were injured.
Bob Younger got his elbow blown off in the Northfield robbery. Jim was shot. His jaw was shattered by a bullet that lodged itself underneath his brain. Cole Younger had something like 20 bullet wounds in him.
Mm-hmm.
He had a lot of them. That man lived. He lived to serve 25 years in prison.
Stillwater Prison,
Minnesota.
St. Cloud, I think.
St. Cloud, sorry, you're right. But it just amazes me that this man...
I think they were in shock. I don't think they expected what they were coming into when they came to that town, and didn't think that these people would put up a fuss because they hadn't had that much problems with their other escapades. And then they come to this one town where they all bond together. See, that just shows you don't mess with farmers,
Really. The farmers and the shop owners ran and got their guns. Everybody ran and got their guns. And if they didn't have guns, they picked up rocks and threw at them.
Right.
And these guys traveled for something like 10, 11 days in the woods of Minnesota and still didn't make it any further than Mankato.
I know. Well, they were hundreds of, Minnesotans, were pursuing them. I'm surprised that James brother got away. I'm surprised the James brother got away because, they probably split off and went a different direction. But, eventually they did get caught. But didn't Cole say something like, we tried a desperate game and lost or something like that?
Yeah, he did. He said He said, when asked about it, he said, we tried a desperate game and we lost. And Charlie Pitts ended up getting killed when he resisted. They were at a little south of Mankato, and they were at this lake area.
Right.
And they were going to fight till the death. And when they jumped to try to run, it was every man for himself. Charlie Pitts ended up getting killed. Jim got shot. Bob was shot. Coleman Younger was shot all to heck.
Well, they all pled guilty so they wouldn't be hung.
That was something else, too, I was going to mention. When they went to court, they pled guilty to escape the death penalty. And at the time, Minnesota was about the only state that had that. At that time, if you pled guilty, you'll get life in prison, but you won't get hanged.
Right. They still don't execute up here, up in the northern area. But yeah, they pled guilty, and then what they served, life in prison, basically.
They served 25 years in prison, and the thing of it was they were model prisoners. Now, Bob Younger died in prison in 1889, I think they said. And
Coleman, he got paroled in
Him and Jim got paroled in 1901.
Something like that, yeah.
And the thing of it was, they were such model prisoners that the warden of the prison, the sheriff, the townspeople, everybody that came in contact with this man liked him.
Well,
he just had a way about himself.
Yeah, he had a golden tongue. That's basically what it was.
Yeah, it's like I said, he had the gift of gab.
He got people
out of prison because
giving
people
up their
liked
pants.
him.
Yeah, well, he had the gift of, he could say anything and people would be like, give him everything, I'm surprised. Well, but they also, after, he got paroled, him and his brother went into selling tombstones and insurance,
Yeah.
Which is kind of an odd, pair to sell tombstones and insurance.
Part of their parole conditions were they couldn't do anything that would... They couldn't appear anywhere. They couldn't write a book. They couldn't do anything that they would collect money for.
Well...
talking about their life as outlaws and stuff.
So because they said Coleman Younger and Frank James, hooked up later on in life and was touring around in the Wild West show.
Right.
And they were lecturing.
But at the time that Cole Younger was paroled from prison, he couldn't even leave the state of Minnesota. But
after he was pardoned, 2 years later, then he got to go back to Missouri.
The reason for that was because Jim Younger committed suicide. He suffered from depression. He suffered, and it was really bad when he couldn't leave Minnesota and go back to Missouri to be with his family. And Jim Younger just had a hard time outside of prison. Well,
yeah, but I'm not going to feel bad for the man.
said he had a hard time in prison. He just couldn't adjust.
Well, then he shouldn't have been killing people. He wouldn't have been in prison.
That's true. But Jim Younger committed suicide in a hotel room in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1902. Now, after Jim Younger committed suicide, there was a friend, a matter of fact, the man that Cole Younger was working for at the time was one of the people that helped hunt him down and helped capture him. And he started this campaign to so the governor or the parole board would let Cole Younger go back to Missouri.
Oh, okay.
And eventually he was allowed to go back to Missouri.
Which wasn't too long after he got out. 2 years ain't that long. Of being, after getting out on, from prison and stuff, and then 2 years later, then he got to go back. But I did read about him and Frank James hooking up for a while and then doing the Wild West show, and they were just running around on a lecture circuit preaching about the evils of crime and stuff, which I kind of thought was funny.
That was in 1903, and it was called the Cole Younger and Frank James Wild West Show. And they made money off of that. For years, well, I'll tell you, for years, after Jesse James was killed in St. Joe, Missouri.
Right.
And he was buried at their farm in Kearney. Well, Jesse James's mother used to run tours to that grave. And she would charge for it.
Well, yeah.
And if people wanted a rock off the grave, she would charge them for the rock. So she charged them like 10 cents to see the grave. And I think it was like 15 cents or 5 cents, something like that, for a rock. And when the rock started getting bare, she'd go down to the river, gather up some more rocks, and take them up, dump them on the grave. Well, that's how this woman made her living after her sons were gone. And Frank James never served a day in prison. After Jesse James was killed, he went to the governor. He got and turned himself in. He ended up getting a pardon.
What was his name? Thomas something. I can't remember the guy's last name. The governor's Thomas somebody that he went.
I don't remember.
Critterson or something. I don't remember. But that was like in 18 something that he ran and got acquitted.
Yeah. But then, but when he got back to Missouri, him and Frank James hooked up, and they started lecturing and touring. You know, charging people a dime to listen to them.
I know, but they were preaching about the evils of crime. Don't do crime, you know what I mean?
Right. Stupid. Don't do this. Don't, you know, we did it. 25 years in prison.
Well, they also said that he, at the end of his years and stuff, he declared he'd become a Christian and, you know, was a churchgoer and, you know.
Yeah, and he repented his criminal
all his
past.
stuff, yeah, so.
And he died in 1916 at his so-called daughter's home in Summit Lee, or Lee Summit, Missouri, and he's buried in the Lee Summit Historical Cemetery. Now, his daughter was supposedly from his
affair with Belle
Starr.
Right.
Belle Starr was, her real name was Myra Maybelle Shirley.
Yeah, but I think we're going to talk a little bit about her on the second half, though. But we haven't really touched on Bloody Bill Anderson, really. And, you know, we said maybe like 2 lines about him. I was kind of curious of when we're going to finish talking about him, you know.
Oh, we can talk about him right now.
But you can finish the part where they had the daughter, you know, throw in the daughter that he had with Belle Starr.
Like I said, Cole Younger, he died in, what did I say, 1916.
In March.
At his daughter's house in Lee Summit, Missouri, which is right outside of Kansas City. And Pearl Starr. She never went by Coleman or Younger. Gosh, I keep saying Coleman, like Coleman should be the last name. But
Penny posted the name in the group of the or not the group.
Oh, one
Skype.
thing I forgot to mention. Huh?
She posted the name in Skype. Who was the governor that pardoned Frank James?
Okay.
Thomas T. I can't say the last name.
One thing I was going to mention, because this kind of ties it to my area, but during the Civil War, Jim Younger was captured near Smiley, Kentucky, and he was sent to the military prison in Alton, Illinois, and he was released from that prison in 1865. Well, Alton, Illinois is not too far from where I live. It's like 30 miles away, depending on which way you go. And they did have a big military prison there. And it was overcrowded. It had smallpox. As a matter of fact, smallpox broke out so bad in this prison that the people that had smallpox were sent to one of the islands in the middle of the Mississippi River. And Alton sits on the Mississippi-Missouri River.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a great show too, talking about Alton, because this later on this prison was tore down, and
all the prison ghosts
yeah,
ran
all the
amok.
prison. Well, they built the Unitarian Church out of all the old stone, and that Unitarian Church
I bet
is
you
haunted.
that church is haunted. Okay, that's great. Let's use this. All that
But
negative energy.
But like I said, Jim Younger kind of has ties to Alton because he was in the military prison there.
Mm-hmm.
And and talking about what I was going to say, I don't know if I said this or not, but Cole Younger says that he never met Jesse James until 1866. He did serve with Frank James, and him and Frank James were good friends, but Coleman Younger was in Kentucky by the time that Jesse joined Quantrill's Raiders in 1863, and it wasn't long after that Quantrill was more or less forced to leave the area, and Bloody Bill Anderson took over.
Right, which, well, really blew it up a couple notches. You know what I'm saying?
Bloody Bill Anderson did not care who he killed. He didn't care if he killed Union soldiers. He did not care if he killed civilians.
Or
he did not care if
whoever.
he killed women and children.
Right.
This man was driven by revenge. He wasn't driven by the love of the South. He wasn't driven
for any
by
political
their
cause.
way of life.
Yeah.
This man was driven by revenge, and he had the perfect way to do it. He was a pro-Confederate raider, and while no real battles took place in Missouri, there were a few battles in Missouri, don't get me wrong, but while there was no major battle in Missouri, I lost my train of thought. I cannot believe that. But he, when he went in with the attitude, kill them all, don't leave anybody. When he went in to raid a town, kill them all, don't leave anybody. This man was so cruel.
Ruthless, yeah.
Ruthless, sadistic, he didn't care. And he got to the point to where he didn't care if the civilian was pro-Union or pro-Confederate. It didn't make any difference to him. He didn't get the name Bloody Bill for no reason at all.
Well, no, because he was jacked up in the beginning anyway. Like I said, he didn't really care to want to work.
Look at this picture of him that's up now, and look at his eyes. The man's even got crazy eyes.
Well, isn't that crazy? I think they're probably like blue, but I mean, in a way, he is kind of an attractive man, but he's just screwed up in the brain. Seriously screwed up in the brain.
He was seriously screwed up. Even as a kid, he always kind of tended toward the outlaw side.
Tended towards the nutty side.
But he was finally killed in a battle.
He kind of looks like a pirate, too. In a way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he does.
The look in the hat,
Yeah, he does. I can't remember when he was, what year he was killed. I think it was 1864. It wasn't too long, because he took over in the fall of 1863. He took over the Raiders in the fall of 1863. Civil War was over with by the end of 1864.
Right.
But
they kept on going. He kept on going. I'm not trying to laugh and make a light of it, but the guy was seriously, if you read about him, you're just like, oh my gosh. I'm surprised they hadn't made movies about him. Maybe they have, or TV shows, but this dude was seriously jacked up.
You know what? When you see movies
right,
about the Civil War, and take the movie The Outlaw Josie Wales, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever seen that movie or not, but Bloody Bill Anderson is mentioned in there.
I have not seen it. I'm not going to lie and say I have, but no, I have not.
But he's more or less mentioned in passing, and it's the same way with even movies about Jesse James and the Younger Gang. One of the best movies out there about the James Younger Gang is called The Long Riders. And Bloody Bill Anderson, I might have seen that. Yeah. Bloody Bill Anderson. It's Stacy Keach, the Carradine boys. Matter of fact, David Carradine played Coleman Younger. But Stacy Keach and James Keach played Frank and Jesse. But even in that movie, Bloody Bill Anderson's more or less mentioned in passing. A matter of fact, when he's mentioned, it's like close to the end of the war.
Right. And I'm really surprised that there's not. I mean, there's a lot on him on the internet, but I'm surprised that people had never really made a. I mean, because he was pretty brutal, way more brutal than Jesse James. Really. And a lot of his killing.
But like I said, he was driven by revenge.
Oh, I think he was driven a little bit more than just revenge.
I think he personally.
I think he loved killing.
I think he did too. And my personal opinion of Bloody Bill Anderson is he was just nuts.
I don't know if he was nuts per se, but I do know that he was just a dark. I think he was messed up even as a child, because if you kind of read about his upbringing, the little things and stunts that he was doing, and he didn't even care about his family, really. I mean,
he stole from his family. Right? He stole from his dad.
He didn't even care that he didn't finish doing the jobs that he was supposed to do for his dad's business and stuff. It's like he didn't care. All he cared about was himself.
He didn't care about the money in his dad's pocket. He cared about the money in his pocket. And this was a guy that was not raised in poverty. I mean, he came from a well-to-do family. He came from a family with a high social status in their community, and he was still just a rotten kid.
After the Civil War, though, he was living in this. I can't remember where he was living at this one time, but he was living there and with a couple other people, and he was helping other people with their shady businesses. You know what I'm saying? And then he got back into the horse trading, quote unquote, business after the Civil War, because horses were in such high demand then. Remember?
No, that was before the Civil War.
No, it was also after. It was also after.
Bloody Bill Anderson was killed in a battle.
I don't know. I thought I read something that was before and a little bit after the Civil War, because they needed horses a lot during and after the Civil War. I could be wrong on the date thing, or somebody, maybe somebody messed up one out on their website. But what I was reading is like he would basically steal the horses, sell the horses, and then go back and steal them again from the same people he sold them to.
Yeah. And then turn around and sell them again.
Yeah, someone else,
He would sell horses to the army, to the Union Army, and then sneak back in there and steal them, and turn around and sell them to another group of Union soldiers. But you can only do stuff like that so long, and word gets around.
Right.
But by the time he enlisted in the army, the reason he was pro-Union for a while. He started out pro-Union. And when, I forget what happened, but he was tired of the Jayhawkers, because he was raised in Kansas. He was tired of the Jayhawkers stealing from everybody, and the raids that the Jayhawkers were pulling. So he turned around and he enlisted in the Confederate States Army. He ended up with Quantrill, and then he turned around and stabbed not literally, but he stabbed Quantrill in the back, told a lie on him, forced Quantrill to leave the area, and when he took over, things just got worse.
Mm-hmm. That's an understatement. It was just...
Yeah, that's actually an understatement.
Yeah.
Right. He was just...
brutal.
Oh, he was brutal. And like I said, he didn't get the name Bloody Bill for no reason. And to tell you the truth, I don't even think he was driven by revenge. I mean, he would steal from his family when he was younger.
I think he claimed it was. That's what he claimed when he first started joining into these groups or whatever, but it was beyond that. I think that he had, enjoyed the first time he killed, and, during the war and everything. I think it just kept on going, and he didn't want to stop. He enjoyed what he was doing. He enjoyed taking what he wanted whenever he wanted. Even if he didn't want something, he just shoot you for no reason. Just you'd be dead.
I just think that he enjoyed killing. I think that because he killed men before he went into the army.
Wait. Oh, really? I thought it was after. Okay.
No, he killed a couple men. I forget what the reason was off the top of my head. But he killed a couple men before he went into the army. And he wasn't caught.
He was
when he went into the army, that just gave him a so-called legal reason to commit murder.
But he was like the best when he was in the war of what he was doing, like top of the top. You know what I mean? For
Yeah.
what was the word? The guerrilla, whatever the heck they called them. You know,
Yeah.
he was like the top of everything. You know what I mean? So
he was good at what he did.
yeah,
And he was
killing.
good in a fight.
Yeah.
And he was a dead shot.
Right, a great sniper.
But he just enjoyed killing. It got to the point to where he didn't care if the people he killed, like I said, he even killed civilians, and he didn't care if they were pro-Union or pro-Confederate. He killed them. And he took what he wanted to take. He robbed banks, he robbed trains, he robbed stagecoaches, he robbed civilians, he robbed Union soldiers to get money to fund his little guerrilla group.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't care where he got the money. And the thing of it is, the Confederate soldiers that fought down south, some of them fought barefoot. I mean, funding was so little and ammunition was so scarce, and food, a lot of them went hungry. This man had a fully funded guerrilla group. They never wanted for anything, but he wasn't above killing his own men if they didn't do what he wanted them to do.
As I said, he just had, he'd be like a typical serial killer for back in those days. He was beyond.
Today he'd be called a serial killer.
Right, or a spree killer, one or the other. You know what I'm saying? But he was. I consider him a lot worse than Jesse James and Frank James were. That's for sure. And I'm surprised that he wasn't talked about.
Worse.
I'm surprised he wasn't talked about more or had movies done about him. As far as all that stuff.
He's always mentioned in passing, though.
Yeah.
That's what gets me in books, in movies. He's mentioned in passing. The most I have ever read about this man was in Cole Younger's book. And
I'm surprised Cole Younger and him didn't get in it.
Well, Cole Younger eventually left that group, and so didn't Frank and Jesse James. After Cole Younger left the group, that's when Jesse James showed up in 1863. Cole Younger was sent off by a general to go down to Texas. No, it was Fort Smith, Arkansas, down by Fort Smith, Arkansas. It's kind of the best way I could say it is to kind of spy on them. And then he was sent to California, then up to Seattle. Now, why he was sent up to Seattle, I don't know, because as far as I know, Seattle wasn't even in Washington wasn't even in the war.
Yeah.
I don't think California was either.
Well, I don't know. I guess we'll have to look it up and correct ourselves if we were.
Parts of Texas were.
Yes.
Yeah, I would have to look it up to find out for sure. But while Cole Younger was away, that's when he got word that Lee surrendered at Appomattox, and so the war was over. So Cole Younger thought, well, war's over. I'm going home. And Cole Younger made a name for himself while he was in the Army, the Confederate Army.
Yeah.
That they even looked for him after the war. And I don't know about today. I mean, today when a war is over or you're out of the Army, you're just an ex-soldier. Back then, for years after the Civil War, the Union forces were trying to track down these so-called famous Confederate soldiers, the ones that made the name for themselves, and Cole Younger happened to be one of them.
Well, hey, how about we take a quick intermission?
Okay.
For a little bit, and then we'll come back and finish talking about, finish up with Cole Younger a little bit and get into Belle Starr and all the rest of the little bit tidbits that we were going to talk about tonight. So for those of you who are watching over at Ustream, if you want to come in and join the chat, you can scroll down and find our URL and come join in with the discussion with everybody else. We'll be back in about 3 minutes and some odd seconds. So if anybody wants to go get a drink or whatever, we'll be back in a little bit. Welcome back to Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. I'm Raven, and
I'm Spooky.
Yeah, yay! Welcome back.
You didn't think I'd make it back in time, did you?
I wasn't sure.
Oh my goodness!
But you did.
But I did.
Right on the money. Speaking of
Belle
money.
Starr.
Yeah.
Her real name was Myra Maybelle Shirley. And her mother was Eliza Hatfield from the Hatfield-McCoy feud fame. And so it kind of makes me wonder if she didn't have outlaw in her blood.
Well, so John Shirley was her dad, right?
Right. Her
mother was a Hatfield.
Yep, her mother was a Hatfield.
Which were famous, for those who don't know, who may be younger, were famous for the big family feud.
Yep,
the Hatfields and the McCoys. We should have thrown them in this conversation.
That would be a good show to do.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But they sold their farm, and they moved to
Carthage, Missouri.
Right. And bought an inn and
and a livery stable.
Yeah, so they were rich.
Yeah, she didn't.
Another rich one. Yeah.
She didn't come from a poor family either. You know, and of course, a lot of stories you hear though is that she was this Cherokee Indian who turned outlaw. Belle Starr was not a Cherokee Indian.
No, she married an Indian.
She married a Cherokee Indian named Sam Starr. That was her second or third husband.
Third, I think. Allegedly.
Coleman Younger claims that he never met Belle Starr. Now, this woman grew up in the same area as the James boys and the Younger boys.
They were all friends. Stated otherwise, that she grew up with them and they all palled around. So
I know, but in his book, he claims that
What, so he doesn't
He
want to
didn't
claim his
know her.
daughter? Speaking of Belle Starr, I should throw her photo up. That'd help.
But he does say, this is the thing, though. He does say that in spring of 1864, he visited her father, who had a farm near Dallas, because they did live in Texas for a while. But he said that he only saw the two brothers. Belle Starr was the oldest, and then she had 3 younger brothers.
Belle Starr.
Belle Starr.
That's what we're on. Remember, Belle Starr. She was
convicted
for a horse thief, in 1883.
She was convicted. This is a woman. Okay, the first man she was married to, his name was Jim Reed. Now, Coleman Younger claims that he never met this woman, but
didn't she have a brief marriage
about her family?
Yeah, but didn't she have a brief marriage with his uncle or something like that?
She had. Well, she was married to a man named Jim Reed.
Yeah, but she was also uncle of Charles Younger. Yeah.
She was married to a man named Jim Reed, and she supposedly had 2 daughters by him, Pearl being one of them. Now, Pearl went by the name Pearl Reed, but Belle Starr always claimed that Pearl belonged to Cole Younger. Jim Reed turned to petty thief. He fell in with a bunch of criminals. He became a petty criminal, and he was killed during a stagecoach robbery. So, it's rumored that Belle Starr was married to a Charles Younger, which was Cole Younger's uncle. Right. But the marriage only lasted for 3 weeks. So, but there's really no evidence that she was married to this man. But it just seems to me that it would be hard for Cole Younger to deny knowing this woman when she grew up in their area. He knew her father. Right. And 2 of her brothers.
And she allegedly was married to an uncle.
Yeah, supposedly she was married to
Charles.
Coleman's uncle.
Yeah, Charles. In 1878, so.
Yeah. So I just find it
why is
he claims that he did not know her. Matter of fact, he says in his book that he thinks the reason that she always claimed that Pearl was his daughter was because to gain notoriety. Being connected to Cole Younger gave her some sort of prestige, and having Cole Younger's child gave her even more prestige. But there is no doubt Belle Starr was an outlaw.
Oh yeah, totally.
She ended up marrying a Cherokee Indian and settled in Indian Territory. His name was Sam Starr. Mm-hmm. When she was in while she was in the Indian Territory, and the thing of it was, she would come out of the Indian Territory, rob a stage, go back into the Indian Territory because she was safe there. Because at that time, only the Army could go after her, and they had better things to do.
It's kind of like how tribal, they have, like, nowadays too, only the tribal laws can.
Well, nowadays, the only people that can go into an Indian reservation is a U.S. Marshal. The FBI can't go in.
Right.
The military can't go in. The only person that can go in is a U.S. Marshal that can legally go in.
But they depend on the tribal police to take care of it.
But if they're going in there to arrest anybody, they have to go before the tribal council to get permission.
Right. Because they have their own.
Back then, the Army could go in. But the Army was the only one that could go in, and back then, they're not going to go after a petty criminal, which they thought she was. They just had better things to do.
But what'd they say? She learned how to organize planning and fencing for the rustlers and horse thieves and bootleggers and she was also harboring them from the law. You know, she'd bring them in and protect them there too.
Exactly. Exactly. She and she stole cattle, horses. She robbed stages. In 1886, Sam Starr was killed in a shootout with the sheriff. So to keep her home in the Indian Territory.
In what year was that?
1886.
Okay, because prior before that, her and her husband, I thought, were charged with horse theft, like in 1883.
She was charged with stage robbery.
But also in 1883, her and her husband were charged with horse theft and tried before the hanging judge, Isaac Parker, in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And she was found guilty and served, I think, 9 months at the Detroit House of Corrections.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, she was convicted for a stage robbery, and she served 9 months in prison. And the thing of it was, there was no proof that she was even near the area when she robbed that stage.
Oh, see, what I read is she was charged for horse theft then, and that's when she got busted and was sent for 9 months in Detroit.
That could have been it.
In the correction in Michigan.
But there was no proof that she was even in on that.
But then again, she was also proved to be a model prisoner during her time in jail, and she won the respect of the prison matron. Yeah,
prison matron just loved her. She got out after 9 months.
She must have learned how to speak.
And she went right back to the Indian Territory. And when Sam Starr was killed, to keep her home in the Indian Territory, because she was an Indian, okay, and
he was in a gunfight.
She married Sam Starr's younger brother, who was 15 years younger than her. That's to keep her home in the Indian Territory, because that's where she was safe. She would come out and steal horses. She'd rob stages, and help out bootleggers, and then she'd go right back into the Indian Territory, because she knew that nobody would follow her in there, and the only people that could go after her would be the Army, and the Army at that time were busy with other things.
Right, and she could, get bribery them and cohort them to get money. That's how she made her money from, is by protecting these people. But she'd threaten them, and they'd have to.
And it was a very lucrative business for her.
Well, yeah, for sure. But Sam Starr, he was killed in that gunfight with the officer Frank West, and both of them were killed.
Yeah.
That was I don't remember what year that was, 1886 or something like that, in December or something. I can't remember. Sorry, I have that head injury still, but yeah.
It was 1886.
Okay. So yeah, and then she was basically on her own after that, and she was still, I don't know, she's crazy. She's crazy too. They're all a bunch of crazies, no offense, but
well, you know what? They'd have to be to live the way they did back then.
It makes you wonder, though. I mean, they were all pals when they were younger. It makes you wonder what was in the water that made them all become insanely crazy outlaws, from the Younger brothers and the James brothers. Then you got Belle Starr. They were all hanging out.
Yeah.
In the same area, so.
I just find it very hard to believe that he did not know her. I think that he did have an affair with her, and if you ever saw a picture of Pearl Starr.
Oh, I think we have one.
Or she went by Pearl Reed.
Yeah, here it is.
That she even favors him.
Oh, let's see. Okay, we'll look at her for a little bit. I threw her picture up.
But if you look at Belle Starr, that is not an attractive woman.
Well, maybe she was attractive for her day.
She never had any problems getting a man.
If she didn't, she'd shoot him. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Just joking. I don't know. Okay, well, here's a little picture of, Pearl Starr, the alleged daughter. Now we can look at her, and then should we look at the younger photo of him or the older photo?
I think that she favors him in the older photos.
Okay, let's see here. It's just... Yeah, you can see that same type of jaw feature.
Yeah, I think she does favor him.
And his forehead, yeah.
Yeah, I really do.
Okay, I'll go back. I'll leave my picture on Belle Starr. Yeah, they do have similarities, but, it's hard to tell what somebody looked like back in the day with photos. They only had 1 or 2 photos. Doesn't mean it was their best photo day, and they didn't have the best cameras back then, but,
Yeah, but look how she's dressed. If you notice how Belle Starr was dressed, Belle Starr didn't dress like a typical female bandit.
Well, okay, we'll go back to Belle Starr.
She liked wearing velvet clothes, She liked riding sideways. She actually enjoyed being a lady, but she was a ruthless lady.
Well, look at the time period. I mean,
she didn't have any qualms about shooting anybody either. And like I said, she would commit her crimes and she'd run right back into the Indian Territory. And
talking about her or this kid still. So I mean, I threw up the picture of Belle Starr, but I don't know. It does kind of look like them, but maybe he doesn't want to admit that he even had anything to do with her because he didn't like her ever. You know what I mean? So. But maybe you're right. Maybe she just did it to get notoriety.
Personally, I think he could have been in love with her, and he didn't want to soil her reputation, as if her reputation can be saved.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, back then, you didn't. If you had an affair with someone, you didn't say nothing about it. It was discreet.
Or maybe it had to do with the fact that
even though everybody may have known it was going on, you didn't say nothing about it.
Maybe it had to do with the fact that she was married to his uncle for a short time period, and maybe he didn't want, maybe he fooled around with her then.
Pearl was born way before that. Pearl was born when she was married to Jim Reed.
Oh, that's right.
Pearl was the oldest.
Right.
And it just, I think that it was just a discreet affair, because there were a lot of people that knew Belle Starr was in love with him. And but Cole Younger claims that he never met her, and I just find that so hard to believe. I really do. And Belle Starr was murdered in 1889. She was shot in the back twice, and to this day her murder is unsolved.
Actually,
and it was 2 days before her 41st birthday.
They kind of think that it has to do with the man that she was married and the family members that she was with at the time. It's because he was wanted for murder in Florida, and they had feared that she was going to squeal and out them out, and then they came and ambushed her and shot her with their own shotgun.
I have no idea about that, but anything's possible. I mean, whoever shot her in the back. She didn't see them coming.
In the back and the neck, but they shot her with her own shotgun. It's out there on the net.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood you. Sorry. Yeah.
It's out there on the internet and stuff, a lot of places, and I don't know for a fact. I wasn't there to witness it. But she was married to these people, and she was still, they were all kind of into criminal stuff, and one, like I said, one was.
And the thing of it was, she was generous to the Starr family.
Yes.
This woman, she made a lot of money. She had a fortune herself. She may have came for money, but she made a small fortune for herself, and she was very generous to the Starr family. But that could have been because she was trying to keep her home in the Indian Territory. Because if she had not married Sam Starr's younger brother, she would have had to have left the Indian Territory, or back then they called it Indian Territory, but we all know it was a reservation. That's like today, and and one thing was, she didn't have any kids by Sam Starr.
Mm-mm.
Today, if you live on an Indian reservation, and
I don't think you can, though, can you? I think that you have to live off of it if you're married to somebody that's not.
I personally know a girl that's married to Omaha Indian.
Uh-huh.
His last name is Blackfeather.
Uh-huh.
And they got a divorce. Well, they had 2 kids. They got a divorce, and
she had to leave though.
She didn't have to leave. She could have stayed because of the children, because the children were registered to the reservation.
Oh, I gotcha.
She left, though, because there was always the chance that the tribal council would give the girls to her ex-husband.
Mm-hmm.
But she can take them. The Omaha Indian Reservation has a hospital, and other things. There's their own school and stuff, but it has a hospital and a medical clinic and everything. So she gets free health care for these kids if
Well,
she takes them to the reservation to be treated.
not all reservations have. It's
Not all
sad.
reservations
That's
have
sad.
that.
They should. They should. That they deserve to have a lot. It's kind of sad. But that's a totally different topic and conversation than what we're talking about tonight. But yeah, I see what you're saying. But back to Belle Starr. Right. Not nowadays of Indian reservations. But so yeah, I see. I thought I had read that she had moved on and then got married to some other people. And
I don't know.
he was a murder. He was wanted for murder in Florida, and him and his
Oh yeah,
him and
yeah,
his kids.
Because she was married like 3, maybe 4 times. I don't know.
4 times, 4 or 5.
But
yeah.
even in Coleman Younger's book, he mentions visiting her father in Dallas County, Texas. He even mentions that. He mentions about going down. He was down there to buy cattle, and he even mentions that Jim Reed was down there, and he mentions stopping in to see her dad. Oh, what the heck's his name?
I don't know, but
I can't remember what her dad's name was, but
you mean
John Shirley.
John Shirley, yeah.
He mentions all of this, but yet he says that he did not know Belle Starr, did not know who she was, but yet in his book he knew her full name.
And I'm surprised because you don't really know anybody.
Himself.
Yeah, you don't really know anybody's name really back then unless you knew them, because it's not like you got the information we have today to. You run into different names in passing and stuff. He had to, and it's not like she was that famous where he heard her all over the place. They grew up together, them and the James brothers,
Yeah.
He knew her well.
There was just no way that he could not know her. Just no way. And then when he gets out of prison, he goes to live with his daughter Pearl. And Pearl was prostitute.
Yeah.
She ran several bordellos.
I threw her picture up, so yeah.
Around the
Pearl
Fort
Star.
Smith, Arkansas area.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yet he didn't know, he didn't know this woman.
Right. He's living with Pearl Star. Well, here he is when he's older.
But he's living with her daughter. Okay. Even if Pearl was not his daughter, he's still living with her, so he had to have known her and her mother.
Right. I'm going to show a little picture of him when he's older and then show back the picture of her while we're talking so people can see. I mean, you can kind of see in a resemblance of his older. You know what I mean? They have the same shaped face and eyes and nose. It's definitely... Why would he go live with her if, he didn't know her mother? So it was one of those coincidences,
Mm-hmm.
A huge coincidence.
And Pearl Star operated, like I said, several bordellos around Arkansas from the 1890s all the way up to World War I. So, this was a woman that got around. And she also made quite a fortune herself doing that. And she grew up in the same area as the James and the Youngers.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, Belle Starr, her mother, was rumored to have been married to Charles Younger for 3 weeks.
Right.
Wonder why they broke up after 3 weeks.
She probably got sick of him.
I think Charles was an honest man. She didn't want an honest man.
He was also way older, too.
Yeah, he was quite a bit older. But I think maybe she might have married him because of the
Younger name. Mm-hmm.
The Younger name, because Cole Younger was quite a famous outlaw by then. And in every movie, and if you've ever seen the movie The Long Riders, in that movie, Belle Starr has a very big part. She's played by Penelope Ann Miller, who did an excellent job with that part, but her and Cole Younger knew each other.
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot more than he admits to, and maybe he just didn't want to have any more ties with her because maybe he didn't care for some of the things that she was doing, and just wanted to cut ties with her completely. That's why said he does.
That could have been. Because he did, after a while. When was it?
He became a Christian.
In 1912, he declared himself a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
How do you just declare yourself a Christian?
Easy. You repent your sins and, all of a sudden
Well, it said he declared himself a Christian and repented.
And changed his life around and lived quietly in the town and died.
And repented his criminal past, so he had to have done it.
If that's what he said.
And this is the thing, too. Okay, he died March 21st, 1916, at his daughter's home in Lee Summit, Missouri, and he's buried in the Lee Summit Historical Cemetery. I'm going to take a wild guess and think that maybe Pearl is buried there, too, or somewhere in the area.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to look that one up a little later. I didn't really research it to see.
Because by the time, 1916, when was World War I? Was that like 1912 or something like that? It was at the beginning of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
But you know what? For a man,
I just don't know where she's buried. That's why I'm trying to think, but I don't remember.
I'd have to look that up.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, I thought I remembered reading it somewhere, but I was trying to, while you were talking, I was trying to think of it, and I can't exactly remember. But I think it is probably near him. I think they might be in the same area, actually. And that's what people were making a comment. Well, if they didn't have a child, why is he staying with her in his older age, and then them being, that doesn't make any sense.
And she accepted this man into her home, knowing full well who he was. So I'm wondering if maybe she didn't know, or I'm wondering if maybe she knew that this man was her real father.
Or had the possibilities of being her real father. Because there was no, I guess they didn't have DNA back, testing back then, but I think they could pretty much know and tell,
Well, surely she had to know. I mean, for years, her mother claimed that Coleman Younger was her father.
1914
for years, Belle Starr did.
Was World War I.
But she had to know something. And it makes you wonder who's the biggest liar, Belle Starr or Coleman Younger.
That I wouldn't take a bet on because I think they're pretty much neck and neck. I mean, come on, it kind of goes with the career path that they chose. It's not like... Well, I don't know. Maybe there is an honest thief out there.
These are
they
people...
tell the truth. I'm going to rob you and shoot you. They're not going to lie, But
these are people that went into the Confederate States Army for one reason or another. And it wasn't just they went into the Army. They were with Quantrill's Raiders. They were with Bloody Bill Anderson. And these were people that were running around Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, and Kansas.
And further up at some points.
And further up at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them, and don't get me wrong, they fought. They fought in skirmishes, but they didn't fight in any real battles like what the South was fighting down in Georgia and Virginia and Kentucky, or even Gettysburg.
See, well, somebody asked in the chat where all these people are buried at. We know where a few of them are buried at. I don't know exactly where all of them are buried at. I know that
Jesse and Frank James are buried on the old family farm in Kearney, Missouri.
Yeah, and Cole Younger, he's buried in Lee Summit.
Coleman Younger is buried in the Lee Summit, Missouri Historical Cemetery. I don't know where Jim Younger was buried. His body was sent back to Missouri, but I don't know where they buried him.
Yeah, you could probably look it up. And I don't know where Charles Pitt, because we talked about him earlier.
Charles Pitts, I believe, is buried in Minnesota.
Oh yeah.
because that's where he died.
And Belle
and he was killed near Mankato, so he may very well be there.
And Belle Starr, I don't know if I know where she. Do you know where she's buried, Belle Starr?
I have no idea where Belle Starr is buried.
Maybe she didn't have it buried.
I don't even know for sure where she was killed. All I know is that she was murdered. She was shot in the back, but I don't remember where she was at the time.
Maybe she's buried in Missouri back with her family. But, I mean, she had, like I said, she had a good life. She didn't even have to turn to horse thieving and everything because she had a classical education and she learned how to play piano and she graduated from the Missouri Carthage Female Academy. And she had, like, just like a private institute.
Yeah, she had private schooling.
Right. It was helped funded by her father. I mean, he was a rich man. She had everything at her beck and call, basically.
All of these people, except the James boys, came from very well-to-do, wealthy families. But the James boys did not grow up in a poor household. Their stepfather was a preacher. Well, their real father was a preacher. And their stepfather was a preacher.
Oh, Belle Starr was buried in Oklahoma.
Well, that makes sense because she spent most of her time in the Indian Territory in Oklahoma. So that would make sense that she'd be. A matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, she would.
She died February 3rd of 1889.
Yeah, if I remember right, I think she was murdered in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. I think she was murdered by her last family that she was married into because he had already had kids and stuff. Like I said, he was a murderer wanted in Florida, and he was worried that she was gonna, because she was kind of turning her life around a little bit towards her end, that she was gonna turn him in, and he freaked out, and they all surrounded her, and that's why I would explain how she got shot with her own shotgun.
Yeah.
Because how else would she let somebody else grab her shotgun? Unless she was like...
Well, it had to be somebody that she knew.
Right.
Just like Jesse James was shot in the back of the head by somebody he knew. Matter of fact, Robert Ford was related to the Jameses.
I mean, we could have went on a whole show just alone with Jesse James and stuff, but everybody talks about Jesse James and those guys, but they don't really talk about Bloody Bill Anderson and how all these ties kind of tied in just from childhood, It's almost like they said, let's, maybe they went to a school of how to be criminals.
I know all of these people, the James, the Youngers, and the Starr, and the Reeds, or the...
And Belle Starr, she knew them.
What the hell? Shirley's. They're tied in because they're all from the same area. They, now Cole Younger claims that he did not meet Jesse James until I think it was 1866, but he fought with Frank James.
Right.
So, but everything.
And then later on, him and Frank James hooked up and ran around, doing that Wild West show too. So it's like, if you weren't pals with anybody, how do you have such good relations with them?
The reason that the James Younger gang lasted so long was because they didn't pull any crimes in Missouri. At that time, once you cross the state line, you were free from other law. You had to do something really, really bad for to get extradited out of your state. And bank robbery just wasn't one of them. I think the only thing that they extradited for at that time was murder. But they always went back into Missouri. They had family that kept their whereabouts a secret. And even the townspeople, the townspeople in Kearney never turned them in. And when the Pinkerton detectives went in looking for Frank and Jesse James, they had no idea what they looked like.
Right.
There was a time that they stopped and talked to, or the Youngers. They stopped and talked to Jim Younger on the road one night, had no idea that they were talking to one of the men that they were looking for.
They did catch on later on that they had an encounter with him, I believe. That's what I read. You know what I mean?
Well, the Pinkertons threw a bomb. It was supposed to be like a smoke grenade into the James home. And the mother was there and a brother named Archie. And Archie was slow. Archie was like 14 years old and he had the mind of a 4-year-old. And they threw this grenade in. It was supposed to just let out smoke, but somehow it ended up in the fireplace and it exploded and it blew the mother's arm off and it killed Archie. Well, Frank and Jesse and the Youngers went into town looking for these two Pinkerton men. And when they confronted them, they just drew their guns and shot them dead. That was the first time. And there were other Pinkertons around that didn't make themselves known at the time. And that's how they found out what the James boys and the Younger boys looked like.
Right. Well, like I said, this whole... I don't know, I lost my thought, but the thing that with Belle Starr and stuff is... I know that she had done more. I wish I would have wrote this down because, like I said, I just got back in town right quick. You know, and I just had a lot on my mind unpacking everything. But I know that she had after Sam Starr died and everything else, she still continued on with her...
Oh, she was the mastermind of that. She did the planning.
Right.
She did the fencing for their stolen goods. She helped hide them. She helped the bootleggers. They paid her money to do all of this, and she did it. She was successful, and she acquired quite a fortune from doing it. I wonder what she did that caused somebody to come up behind her and shoot her in the back. Why didn't they face this woman face to face? After all, she was just a woman.
Well, like I told you, I think, and you can look this up, but I was kind of reading about this briefly before we came on and stuff, but when they were talking, they think that most likely this is what it was. It's that she got slaughtered by that next husband that she was married to, who was an escapee or murderer wanted in Florida and a couple other places, and she was, I think, wanting to start turning her life around, and they thought that she was going to expose them and where they were at and the crimes and stuff that they were doing now, or at the time, with her. And they ambushed her when she was coming home and shot her with their own shotgun.
Now, before I start getting hate mail for saying, hey, she was just a woman, back then, they were considered just women. They were not vicious. They were not cunning. They were not smart enough to do anything because really they had no rights.
Well, yeah, people took care of their animals better than they took care of women.
But Belle Starr was a crack shot. When she aimed her gun at something and pulled the trigger, she hit it exactly what she was aiming for. And
well, Penny said some say her son killed her, and she had let me go roll back up. I lost what it said. She had beaten him with a riding quirt 2 days before she was shot in the back on her way home. He had taken her favorite horse without her permission, and he had said that he would kill her for that. So, I guess he didn't care for getting a beating.
I guess he didn't.
That's what one of our chatters had said, from what they write up. But like I said, I was writing about someone with her family did it, so a couple who knows? I guess you really had to be there to officially know who did what and where, but I guess until they invent the time machine, I guess we'll just kind of have to go with what we're reading.
Well, the problem with history is that it's so embellished.
Well, not that, but it's also changed and redirected where we're supposed to tell, we're told what to believe than what actually happens. That happens a lot in history.
People, it's funny how back then they had no technology to speak of. Okay, they had the telegraph. They didn't have phones. They didn't have computers. They didn't have TVs or anything like that. And word spread like wildfire. You didn't just do something and nobody ever hear about it. Yeah. Because sooner or later, somebody told somebody that told somebody that told somebody.
The grapevine.
Yeah. And which was faster than any telegraph.
Smoke signals.
Yeah, all you needed was one gossip, and by golly, that's all that was needed. And I mean, word spread.
Well, women getting together and quilting and baking, word of mouth. Women spread a lot of it.
Yes, they do. But you know what? Rumors are rumors. Because by the time the rumor starts, by the time it gets 20 people down the line, it's either embellished, it's half truth, or it's a complete lie. The story changes from person to person. And I think a lot of that had to do with the person's imagination that happened to be telling the story at the time. But Belle Starr was no gentle woman. She was a killer. She didn't hesitate to kill. She didn't hesitate to steal. The only husband that she had that it even bothered her when he was killed was Sam Starr. And the reason it bothered her was because she knew she was going to lose her home in the Indian Territory, and the Indian Territory was her safe haven. Nobody could go in there and get her. It was a vast area. She could go anywhere she wanted in that Indian Territory and not be found. So she had to do something to keep her home, because if she had to leave the Indian Territory,
she was in trouble.
She was in trouble.
Yeah, I was going to say something else, but I caught myself. Yeah.
Her safe haven was gone. She had no protection. And the only protection she really had was the fact that a sheriff, back then a U.S. Marshal couldn't go in there. It had to be the military, because it was the military back then that set up those Indian reservations. It was the military that got the Indians on the reservations. It was the military that, for the Indian reservations that were negotiated,
right,
they were the ones that did it. It was all the military. It wasn't until, I think it was 1950, that it was turned over to the U.S. Marshals. It may have been before that, but but she knew that as long as she could go into that Indian Territory, nobody was going to touch her, because at that time too, you had Little Bighorn going on. You had all kind. That's when the military went from fighting the South to fighting Indians.
Right. I just lost my thought. Sorry. I just had something that all of a sudden gone. So it happens when we have so much going on at one time.
But I still think it's very strange that Coleman Younger knew her dad.
Well, how was it strange? They grew up together.
Two of her three brothers.
Oh, but he didn't know her. Yeah.
But he didn't know her. Said he didn't even know her name. Didn't even know she existed.
Selective Alzheimer's.
Until somebody visited him in prison and told him that she was going around saying that Pearl was his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Belle Starr even traveled to Missouri under the name of Younger. And she bragged about having an intimate acquaintance, is what they called it back then, with him. That she, and she even declared at one time that she was his wife, and that Pearl was their child.
I don't know why he would. I mean, there's so many ties. I don't know why. And then the fact to go live with the kid.
Well, okay, he heard the name Belle Starr. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the name didn't ring a bell with him. Maybe if they would have said Bill Shirley,
her real name, yeah.
Yeah, or her real name, maybe he would have known her then.
Myra, what was her name? Myra Maybell
Shirley.
Yeah.
Maybe
it would have clicked with him.
It would have clicked if they'd have said Belle Shirley.
Right.
Or Belle Reed, because he knew he even had talked with Jim Reed, who was married to Belle Starr.
So maybe later on, after he made that statement, it clicked with him, and that's why he ended up living with the daughter. So alleged daughter.
Could be.
That makes sense.
Because he said that while he was in prison, an actress named Lillian Lewis, and I've heard about her, she was quite famous back then, visited him in prison and asked him about her, and even mentioned that was John Shirley's daughter, and he said that was the first time he had any clue to Belle Starr's identity.
Yeah.
But and he thinks that her story was fabricated because of the notoriety it would give her through the Cherokee Nation, because he says the Younger name was widely known through the Cherokee Nation.
Right. Well, the Younger name was widely known in a lot of places.
And not only that, though, Jim Reed served with Quantrill and when Cole Younger was there. So maybe he just didn't know her by Belle Starr. Maybe he just knew her by
her given name.
Yeah, by Belle Shirley.
Mm-hmm. It's probably, that could possibly be it, because, you're running around, he's doing all these criminal activities for years and years and years. Gosh knows how many people he ran into and how many women he had crossed paths with, and he's probably like, I don't know her. Probably some random chick, you know what I mean? And then later on, it probably connected with him.
Coleman Younger never married.
Well, he seemed a little bit too busy to get married. Besides,
he was a little bit too busy to get married. The James boys took time to get married. Jesse James married his first cousin, but Coleman Younger never got married.
Well, maybe he wasn't the marrying type.
Excuse me, I'm having problems with my throat tonight. That's it, he liked the women in the bars too much. He was a drinker. He was a womanizer.
Right. He didn't want to be told what to do and come home and have to
Belle
settle
Starr
down.
owned the bar at one time after she married Sam Starr.
Well, I think that's why she also didn't get along with Charles Younger, is because she didn't want to have somebody telling her what she can and can't do. He was an older gentleman. She's a free-spirited lady.
I think Sam Starr might have been weak-minded. In other words, whatever Belle Starr said.
Oh, Sam's.
That's the way things work.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what? I think that was the happiest relationship she had, and she was truly in love with Sam Starr. And I think that
it was the longest relationship she had.
Yes, but from what I read, she was really in love with him, and it was the happiest time period of her life with him, and together they had the same, life goals.
Well, he was an outlaw.
Right.
Wasn't a very good one, but he was an outlaw.
Well, he was learning from her, but you know what I mean? But they enjoyed each other, and they enjoyed the things that they were doing, be it a criminal activity, but they got along great, Well,
I have no doubt that she was the leader of that pack.
The brains, yeah.
The brains of that outfit. Because she was the one that did the planning. She was the one that fenced the stolen goods, the cattle.
Mm-hmm.
She helped out the bootleggers. And bootleggers.
Well, the rustlers,
I can't understand
the rustlers, the horse thieves, and the bootleggers. What? Well,
because back then, even making moonshine and selling it was legal.
Maybe not in some areas. Who knows? I mean...
Well, for one thing, it wasn't legal to sell it to Indians.
Well, there we go. So she was bootlegging booze to the tribal people. Or,
That's probably what it was. She was helping them...
get what they needed.
Helping them get the whiskey to the Indians.
Right.
Because back then, it was illegal to sell... whiskey to Indians. It was illegal to sell them guns.
Well, let's just face it, the Indians were not treated very good back then. They're not really treated as great now, but I mean, they were really, weren't allowed to have anything, really.
Well, if you stop and think about it, until the white man started bothering the Indians, they didn't have diseases.
Nope.
They didn't drink. They hunted, and
Well,
when they
it's when
did
the
and the rifles that they had came from white men that sold them the rifles.
well they ate and they grew their own food, and they
Yeah,
ate
they lived off the
and
land.
they
They
ate
hunted their own food.
right, and they ate and they grew their own food and everything. They ate properly. It wasn't until we came in and brought all these different, flour, sugars, and all this nasty stuff that's when their health started to deteriorate. And
Yeah.
then we put them in this little box and say, you can only live here, but yet here we're giving you this great gift, but it's not we, but those people before us,
Yeah, and
So,
they moved from place to place. They followed the herds
well, that and
because that was
seasons.
their livelihood.
And
They
the
followed,
seasons.
yeah. Spring they knew what animals to follow to hunt. Spring, summer, winter, even in the winter. Although game was scarcer in the winter.
But they didn't just eat game. You see, they knew a lot about holistic medicine with the herbal plants,
They did.
and they ate a lot of vegetation and stuff. They weren't just meat eaters. They moved around for multiple reasons, but
and plus they didn't waste the animals that they did kill. They made clothing and coats and blankets and stuff out of the hides.
Right. Well, but like I say,
and they were healthy until
we introduced them to our unhealthy lifestyle.
Until they started coming in contact with white people
who introduced them to unhealthy lifestyles. But Belle Starr, she really loved Sam. They enjoyed the things that they were doing, and I think that they probably would have continued on for a long, long time if he wasn't shot and killed by Frank West. Well, he died too. They both died.
Yeah, they both died.
Right.
Which tells you both of them at that particular time were dead shots. I can't imagine getting in a shootout with somebody if meeting them face to face and both of you dying.
Well, they could have been close up when they drew, pow, and there's no leading,
But Sam Starr was her longest
relationship,
and I'm not sure if they had children or not. I don't think they did. I think all she had was her kids by Jim Reed.
She may or may not. I mean, it's hard to say because a lot of things may have been not written down or told about,
Yeah, well, that's true. And the thing about history is it doesn't tell you everything. It tells you a story, but it doesn't really get into it. They can't.
Unless somebody writes.
And a lot of it is second and third hand.
Right, unless somebody keeps a journal of their everyday events, which, go later on in the future, people are going to see tons of history from our time period because everybody, blogs and writes about everything. At 2 o'clock, I ate a piece of bacon. At 2:01, I drank water. So, I mean, they're going to know everything in great detail.
Like, I really care about that stuff.
Yes, but, for the future people, they're going to be like, for our history. You know what I mean? But, I mean, this is probably like the biggest generation where they have everything in detail, where it would have been nice if somebody kept that much detail back then. Imagine the amazing stories we'd be reading about.
Well, you know what? I have an elderly woman that I take around on the 3rd of every month. And this woman is in her 90s. And I sit and listen to the stories that this woman has to tell. 90 years ago was an interesting time. And she tells all kinds of stories. If people paid more attention to people like her, they would know more about their history.
Well, not everybody has encounters with 90-year-old people who have good sound minds.
Well, then, by golly, go to an old folks' home.
Really, yeah. Go help out. Get acquainted with one. Go help out and do your part, and you get to learn some interesting stories.
That's true. But history, history's like, okay, Coleman Younger, he wrote a book. Coleman Younger, I'm sure, made himself look better than what he was in that. Made himself look more innocent.
Yeah.
But there were robberies that took place that were blamed on him while he was in prison. So you can't believe everything that you read or you even hear. But when you read his book, and you can download it at Amazon.com for free.
Yeah, well, maybe
It's
we'll
an
throw
interesting.
maybe we'll throw the link up on our website, on our books and EVPs and link
But it's
site.
an interesting book. When you read this book, you can tell this man had a good education.
Yeah,
He
say
could
that
have been anything he wanted.
a bunch of them
And
could have. They all had the
yeah, a bunch of them
Bill
could have.
Bloody Bill Anderson could have. Belle
Belle
Starr,
Starr had an
Coleman
excellent
Younger.
education. She had a private school education. These people could have
They
became
threw their
anything
lives
in the
away,
world they wanted to,
and they chose to
but
be criminals. Yeah.
they chose to be criminals. Bloody Bill Anderson, he had quite an education. He came from a wealthy family. He turned out to be a cold-blooded killer.
Well, listen, we're running out of time.
Yes, we are. And I want to thank everybody that came in to listen. I especially want to thank Richard, Crazy Guy, Big Boy, and Penny, our mods. And join us next week. Let me find my paper, people.
Her paper.
Join us Tuesday, June 3rd, when we will discuss curses, James Dean, the Hope Diamond, King Tut's tomb, and more. And I hope everyone has a great week out there. And thank you for coming. And please share us on Facebook.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to tell your friends is what you wanted to say. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you on the net somewhere.
Yep. And good night.